Happy Tuesday. It is the 234th day of the year. There are 131 days left in 2023. And welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Thom. Well, it's nearly football season again. It's hard to believe, but it's here. And whether you're talking little league, junior high, high school, college, professional, whatever, the anticipation of another football season is upon us. Hopefully, football will provide some distraction from much of the revisionist politics we're reliving once again. I'll trade you a touchdown for an indictment, or maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns for a couple of indictments. Who knows? I don't think we can get started fast enough for the distraction. Anyway, our G-list guest today is Allison Fitzpatrick. Allison Fitzpatrick, Dr. Fitzpatrick is a higher education consultant. She specializes in strategic planning, operational redesign, and leadership development, and we're looking forward to having that conversation with her. Our show today, of course, is sponsored by the Best Girl Consulting Firm. Let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
Best Girl creates the solution that fits your needs. So let's get to our roundtable. It's Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Good morning, Barbara Wallace Edwards. How are you?
Good morning, Thom. I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you today?
I am doing just fine. Thank you. And where are you today?
I'm back in the Birmingham area again.
Oh,
For
okay.
a little while.
Oh, for a little while. Okay.
Yes.
I can't keep long now. You're a roving reporter.
Absolutely. Got to stay on the go.
How did you do up there?
I didn't win anything, didn't lose anything because I didn't gamble. But I had a great time in Atlantic City. Had a wonderful time. Actually got back to Mobile and went straight to the beach there. Went from the East Coast to the Gulf Coast. Went over to Pensacola to the beach. I had some family visiting there from Knoxville, Tennessee, and so went over and spent some time with them and got a chance to see our brand new baby. I'll call him our brand new baby. He's a year old. But my nephew and his family just moved back from Texas back to Mobile, and so I got a chance to visit with them. Got a chance to go to my home church while I was there in Mobile, that home church that I grew up in. Saw some people I haven't seen in probably over 40 years. So it was a wonderful trip.
You had the adventure of a lifetime in 2 or 3 days.
I did.
Okay.
I packed a lot in those 7, 8 days that I was down
You
that way.
You did.
Yes.
Well, that's good. That's great, actually.
Yes.
So what you got for us this morning?
Well, Thom, I want to congratulate Sha'Carri Richardson, who has been peeing the fastest woman in the world. I don't know if you got a chance to see the race yesterday, but
I did not.
She reclaimed her title and came back in true fashion. That woman is amazing. Truly the fastest woman in the world.
What is this? The 100 meters?
Yeah, I think she's running the 100 meters. Yeah, she ran the 100 meters yesterday and beat Sharika Jackson and Shelly Ann Fraser Price to take home the first major world championship title. So, she was banned from participating in the games in Tokyo and because she tested positive for drugs and it was an unfortunate situation. So she's been working it since that time to get back to her true form, and she's back.
Well, good for her. I guess follow track the way I used to,
Right.
But good for her. That's
absolutely
great. Yeah. Okay. You got anything else you want to talk about?
Not right now. We'll wait till we get Michael on.
Let's get Michael on then. Michael Walker, how are you, man? Michael
Well,
must have
Here I
stepped
am.
away for a
there
minute.
he is.
Here I
Hey,
am.
how
Yeah,
you doing, man?
I am well. How are you this morning?
I can't complain. Life's good. You know,
Good, good. Good
good,
morning,
good,
Miss
good as
Barbara.
well.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am doing well. You may want to let everybody know that the drugs that Shakari was banned from, it wasn't performance enhancing drugs.
Right, right.
It was because of marijuana,
Marijuana, right.
and that happened at the time that her mother died. She didn't know that her mother had passed away. She was in Oregon training, and a news reporter came
Yeah.
up to her and asked her how she felt or how training was going with the death of her mother. And it kind of freaked her out. And she went and, tried some self-medication and then tested positive for marijuana. And that's why she was suspended. It wasn't performance enhancing drugs.
That is true. Thank you for spelling that out.
And yeah, that's interesting. So,
Hmm.
Michael, what's going on with you, buddy?
Man, not a whole lot. I did a little bit of Barbara Wallace. I pulled a page from her playbook and went to Missouri last week, spent 3 days there, but it wasn't all fun for me. I went there for business. I have made a recent acquisition of a title insurance business in Missouri, and needed to go out and meet the staff and talk to them. Whenever there's an acquisition, the staff are always concerned about if there's going to be wholesale changes and what have you. So I just pretty much let them know that that's not how I operate. Whatever's working, we continue to make that work, and I figure out how we can enhance things and improve upon, but it's not going to be wholesale changes. But it was one thing that I mentioned to them. Is kind of funny. We were talking before the show about winning and stuff, and I told them, I said, I like to win. I say, but I hate losing more than I like winning because I expect to win.
Hmm.
So I let them understand that's how I operate. We expect to win.
Right.
We don't expect to lose. So we hate losing more than we do winning. So anyway, that's how that went. Looking forward to it, and it's an opportunity just to expand into another area of insurance.
How many people are in the operation?
We have about 14 people, and we'll soon add another person. And
Congratulations, Michael. That's great.
well, thank you. There are 4 locations. They're in 4 different locations in Missouri. It's located in Columbia, Missouri, which is where the University of Missouri is. I got an opportunity to pass by there. You know what? I got to tell you, growing up in the SEC, we are really spoiled with the size of the stadiums and the facilities and all of that type of stuff. When I passed by and I saw the Missouri Stadium, I would have only recognized it because it had Mizzou on it, and but it looked fairly small if you compare it to, say, the likes of Jordan Hare or Tuscaloosa, Athens, Tennessee, LSU. It looked really kind of small compared to those schools. And I didn't say anything. I just thought to myself, it's a big difference.
Yeah.
Going from SEC stadiums to see another stadium.
Well, yeah, and everybody doesn't worship at that altar.
Right. I was going to say it's not a religion in most states like it is in ours, but
yeah.
So, okay, Michael, you got anything else?
Yeah, I got a couple things. Your favorite past president has to put up a $200,000 cash bond, and he's a little bit teed over about that. He's blaming the district attorney, Fonnie Willis, for doing that, but it was the judge that said the bond at $200,000 cash bond. And he's like, and with that comes some restraints. He's not supposed to discuss the case with anybody, other defendants, only through his attorneys. And he's not to intimidate witnesses and other people that are involved in the case. And
that's gonna be real hard.
Which is gonna be hard, and I just saw something that came across that said it's a nightmare scenario for his lawyers that are going to defend him, because everything he says can be used against him. And it's hard to control that muzzle.
And he's already talking, Michael. That was one of the things I was going to talk about, Tom, but I knew Michael was going to bring it up. But he's already mocking Fannie Willis, saying that she was worried about him running. He said he was going to go visit his friend Putin over in Russia, and since he's the apple of Putin's eye, that's where he was going to run and never to return. So that's why she probably has a bond set for him. But man, this man is crazy.
Well, and sometimes you guys said something earlier, some mistake he made. Sometimes, well, most of the time, to me, they aren't mistakes. He's purposely getting it wrong. He's purposely saying the DA did it when he knows the judge did it,
Yeah.
But that's where he wanted the negative attention to be focused on.
Yeah. But on another note, and this is some news down in your area of Florida, Thom, there's a rare flesh-eating bacteria that has killed 5 people in Florida, 3 in New York and Connecticut, and it's called the Vibrio, if I'm pronouncing that right. It's a bacteria that's found in raw or undercooked seafood, salt water, or brackish water, and it gets into your bloodstream and just kind of eats your flesh from the inside out. And so they're cautioning people to make sure that if you're eating seafood, make sure that it's cooked. One person got the virus from eating raw oysters most recently. Go ahead.
No, I was just going. Did they say what part of Florida? Just South Florida.
Yeah, Tampa, Florida.
Yeah,
is the area.
Florida. Okay.
Yeah, down in Tampa. It says some people in Connecticut, aged 60 to 80 years old, were infected in July, and those 2 patients have died. And they're saying that you need brackish water is created when fresh water from a river or lake meets with salt water or seawater that has salt in it. And so they're saying people need to avoid warm brackish water, especially if they have fresh cuts or scrapes, because the bacteria will enter through the cut of the wound and cause the infection. So, be careful about running out there, jumping in the water, and, make sure you cook your seafood. I used to eat raw oysters, but I've kind of stopped that now. I always get them grilled or, broiled or something like that, because there are a lot of bacteria out there. So just want to caution everybody in regards to that.
Good information. Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Michael, you got anything else you want to talk about?
Well, yeah, I have one other thing that's we had the pandemic and the U.S. government, they tried to help people. There's a woman in Miami that's been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for taking advantage of COVID relief funds, $381,000. And you all know those funds were meant to help people through the pandemic, small businesses and what have you. She put together a scheme, got $381,000, and then went and bought herself a luxury car, a Bentley.
Damn.
And then she rented a luxury apartment and then decided to have some cosmetic surgery. So that's how she felt about the use of the funds.
And that's how she got caught.
Yeah. I don't know what these people are thinking. They really think they can get away with that.
I guess it's short term, I'll do good. I'll live good this week,
Yeah, this is my dream.
The rest of your life, you're going to be living behind bars, though.
Now she's got to go to jail. So she wrote some long dissertation to the judge about how sorry she was for what she did and all of that type of stuff. And they're saying that's maybe why she only got 3.5 years. She still has to pay back like $190-something thousand, I think, in restitution. But
I never understand restitution because if she's gonna be in jail, how is she gonna pay it back?
Yeah. Most times they don't ever pay it back. They just owe the money for the rest of their lives. But
or they get a job and they take half of it every week.
yeah, if they ever get out and get a job.
Yeah. Well, I figure, she's a fairly young person. So 3.5 years, she
Yeah.
gets out. She's going to have to go to work somewhere to, support herself.
Right.
And so then they're going to garnish the wages, but, what kind of job is she going to be able to get where she can pay back $190-something thousand if she, took 381 and went bought a Bentley and a luxury apartment and had cosmetic surgery.
Well, but when you said she was young, I understood it a little more than the Bentley and the apartment, and she was just living in the moment.
Yeah, she was a real estate broker in Miami. So,
okay.
Wow.
Somebody will get her to write a book or something.
Yeah, she'll make some money.
Yeah.
But that really, really irks me when you look at the struggling businesses. And there were businesses that were not able to get any funds because of people like her and all these other celebrities. Tom Brady got over $2 million in PPP money, which means that was forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there were several stars, what's my man's name that was married to Kim Kardashian?
Kanye.
Who?
Kanye.
He got several $1 million and he's a billionaire. So help me understand why these people that are millionaires, billionaires, why are they getting PPP money? There should have been some type of disqualification. Now, this article said that President Biden has allocated $1.6 billion to assist law enforcement agency in tracking down individuals who took advantage of pandemic relief funds.
Yeah, they should.
Yes.
They should.
I agree.
If you got it and you need it for your business, then that was the legitimate reason it was for. And most of the small businesses I know were small, and so they didn't get. They got maybe $25,000, something like that. Which helped the business, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But
it didn't go far enough. Somebody like that's a small business. In most instances, they are probably doing business with other small businesses.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which means they were struggling too. So therefore that interfered with their cash flow and their ability to make it and what have you, and they weren't able to get money. And a lot of times probably they didn't even know how to go about it.
Right.
True.
When you think about it, because there were a lot of steps you needed to go and you had to kind of really be on the inside and know what was available, how to go about it and all of that type of stuff, but yet and still you got somebody like this person that goes and buys a Bentley and get cosmetic surgery in a luxury apartment. I mean, she didn't even have the foresight to go ahead and buy a house. She bought
a luxury apartment. That's crazy.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah. Well, she got 3.5 years to think about it, so she'll figure something out.
Yeah, she'll be in jail. She's gonna meet Big Bertha. Big Bertha's gonna be sticking that booty.
Wow.
Okay. Anything else? Either one of you guys?
No.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Let me just say, first of all, Sean was out last week. She was in a leadership institute at her school, and I understand it went very well. And she talked about it yesterday and the significance of it. And if you've been through leadership type programs, you do the rope things and things like that really help you to come out of your shell if you're in one.
Right.
So we're glad to have her back, and congratulations to you, Sean. So
yes, congrats.
She's got a minute for us this morning. Let's hear from Sean and got a minute.
Good morning to everyone joining in with us. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute. The U.S. Open starts tomorrow, with the top players in the country battling head-to-head to take home their titles. Back in 1950, officials of the United States Lawn Tennis Association accepted Althea Gibson, a trailblazing athlete, into their annual championship at Forest Hills, New York, making her the first African American player to compete in a U.S. national tennis competition. Gibson won a string of American Tennis Association titles on the African American circuit. After being allowed entry into the major tournaments, she became the first Black player to win Wimbledon and the French and U.S. Open titles. Gibson turned professional in 1959 and made even more history by becoming the first African American competitor on the Women's Golf Pro Tour in the 1960s. She was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 1971 and later served as Commissioner of Athletics for the state of New Jersey. Now, before I go, I'd like to share that as a little girl, I remember sitting in the living room with my grandmother while hearing her silently yell at the TV as if she was at the court. She loved tennis so much that I'd like to dedicate this week's Got a Minute to her. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute.
All right. Thank you, Sean. Thank you. So let's get to the G list. Hollywood's got the A list here on Tuesdays and Tom. We have the G list, and our G list guest today is Dr. Allison Fitzpatrick. She's a higher education consultant. She basically deals with strategic planning, operational redesign, and leadership development. She's passionate about teaching educational and business leaders the tools they need to improve their organizations through change. Good morning, Dr. Fitzpatrick. Allison, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Good morning, Tom. Thanks so much for having me, and honored to be a guest on the show. Good morning, Barbara. Good morning, Michael.
Thank you for being with us. So how is everything?
Everything's going well. Over on the other side of the Gulf from you. And it's a little hot, but getting used to the Florida weather.
Because now you guys moved from up north, right?
Yes. We were in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania for 2 years, and then made the move down to Florida almost exactly a year ago.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, it's hot. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It is hot. So tell me about your business.
Sure. So a little bit of background about how I got to where I am. So I've worked in higher education pretty much my entire career. Started as a tour guide during my junior year of college at Temple University in Philadelphia, and just fell in love and never left. So I spent 5 years working in admissions and then moved over to the community college sector, leading branch campuses for about 15 years. So as I mentioned, about a year ago, I made the decision to go out on my own, to leave higher education. Well, shouldn't say I left higher education. I left working for institutions directly, but still definitely serve that population. And so I started my own consulting company, Caladisi Strategies, LLC, where I'm working with educational institutions, nonprofits, and small businesses to help them improve their organizations. As you mentioned, we focus on things like strategy, culture, leadership development. And what makes us a little bit different is that I work directly with leaders to teach them how to do the work. I think in our professional careers, we've seen consultants who come in and hand over a 100-page document and say, here you go, it's done. But they're not always teaching the leaders on how to improve and how to have a longer lasting impact on their organizations.
Well, and most of the time that 100-page thing sits on the shelf. And,
exactly.
You know, when people come into the office, they can point to it and say, yeah, that's our plan over there. Mm-hmm. But nobody's read it. Okay. So let me ask you this. What made you decide to switch over to consultancy?
Well, it was a big decision. I was working as a vice president of a full service community college branch campus serving students in rural Pennsylvania. I made the move to that position during the height of COVID. So July 2020, packed up the family and moved from the Jersey Shore to the mountains, which was a huge change for our family. But education as a sector is going through, particularly higher education, is going through so much change right now that I really felt like I could have more of an impact working with more leaders as opposed to just working on one individual campus.
I think, there's so much going on. Till it can be very difficult for leaders to keep up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a lot changing every day, and you've got to. The leader, first of all, has got to make sure that there's money, and that becomes a big part of their job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. Let me get Barbara and Michael on here. They got some questions for you, and then I'll be back. Barbara?
Yes, good morning, Allison. Let's talk about the changes in higher education. I know you've been working in your entire career. Changes in higher education post-COVID. I know COVID really hasn't left us, but at least it's not as severe as it was at one time. So what type of changes have occurred?
Well, change is really, for all different organizations, all different types of organizations, COVID has just really shaken up the world and changed the way everyone does business. In higher education, we were pretty comfortable, at least in the community college sector, and we were comfortable in the way that we operated, right? And I always tell the story of a week, I'll say it was the first week in March of 2020, I sat in a meeting with colleagues where we talked about how it would take 2 years to implement Zoom on our campus. Mm-hmm. And we know what happened a week later, 2 weeks later, where we were forced to accelerate and forced to adapt and change. Right. So while the pandemic was absolutely terrible and the impacts that it had on many of our communities, it did shake up higher education and force us to adapt quickly, because that turning on a dime was not always a strength. At some institutions it is, but not every institution. And so I'll say some of the positives that came out of it is the ability for higher education to shift. Some of the negatives, though, is that we, particularly at the community college sector and at branch campuses, we lost a lot of our students in that they left for career and never came back. You're competing with businesses who were forced to pay higher wages to attract employees. So now you're competing for that same pool of individuals. So it's had a significant impact on enrollment, and it's had a significant impact on financials. So institutions are forced to be more strategic and really, with the ability to be flexible, because we never know what the world's going to throw at us. Right. But it's forced organizations to be more strategic and more thoughtful with how they move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Michael?
Yes, I have a couple questions. And one thing Thom mentioned that you kind of focus on is leadership development. And I want to ask you this question, and it's an age-old question. I just want to get your opinion on it. Are leaders born or are they made?
Leaders are definitely made, because no matter your personality type, no matter, introvert, extrovert, I think anyone can learn to be a leader. They need to have the support, need to have the role models, and need to have other leaders before them that help shape them and guide them and develop them.
Okay. You always hear a natural born leader, that that phrase that some people just is a natural leader and what have you. So I always wondered, it's almost like the chicken or the egg, which comes first, but your opinion is that they are made. So
my opinion is that they're made, and my opinion is also that there's no such thing as the natural born leader. I think over time, our expectations of what a good leader should look like have evolved. It no longer needs to be the loud extrovert who can clap their hands and get everyone's attention and have, get immediate response or respect. Sometimes it's a quiet leader. Sometimes it's an introvert who guides and develops and helps support their organization and their employees to get to their final goal. So I think that definition has changed a bit over time.
Okay. All right. And just as a follow-up question I have is, being in the education and what have you, I've noticed there's been a trend recently where there seems to be somewhat of a dilution, if you will, of the college degree, where there are companies now that are now relaxing the requirements of their jobs, requirements of having a college degree. And I read most recently that companies like Google and what have you, they're looking at a skill set. So people that maybe have a skill set versus a college degree are now getting more opportunities. Give me your input on that. Where is that headed? And that's kind of been in the mix for a minute, that devaluing a college degree nowadays and going more to a skill set or trade.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example of something else that was accelerated in our COVID and post-COVID world, is that devaluing of the college degree. I think it's a testament to the partnerships between employers and colleges and universities. It's, working in the community college sector, particularly on the branch campus side, I've always been incredibly engaged with the local employers. In the Pocono Mountains, I worked really closely with, tourism and hospitality industry. We had some manufacturing and worked really closely to give feedback into the programming that we offered on campus to make sure that it was meeting the needs of the employers. And I'll say most institutions have committees for each of their degree programs as well that bring employers in to give feedback to make sure the curriculum is timely and is getting them the types of trained students that they need. On the flip side, I will say the community college is really where it's at in meeting these needs. We often say that, that the college education isn't necessarily needed for particular jobs. It's a particular skill set. But when you're looking at technical abilities, electricians, AC repair, advanced manufacturing, all of these are programs that are run by our technical schools and our community colleges. So while not the traditional college degree, we still need those organizations to train for career.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good. So, Allison, tell us a little bit about Branching Out, your book, and a strategic planning toolkit for branch campus leaders, and having some familiarity with branch campus to my wife.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us a little bit about the book, what inspired you to write it, and what's next?
Sure. So this past year, I completed my doctorate. And as I'm sure you know, Thom, Dr. Gossam was my dissertation advisor throughout the process. And she was a huge support for me. Hi, Joyce. And as I went through the process of writing my doctoral dissertation, on strategic planning at community college branch campuses, I really learned a lot. It's a very specific topic. So I really did a very deep dive into it. I was already pretty well versed on the subject after going through planning at a few of the campuses where I worked. And I've worked in the field for about 15 years. And it really shined a light on the need for some additional support for branch campus leaders. So the book is kind of a spin-off on the dissertation work that I did. My committee strong-armed me, or should I say convinced me and encouraged me into publishing my work because they felt like it was something that was very needed. So it is a toolkit. I can show. This is the cover. If you can see it, I know I'm blurred. It is a toolkit specifically for branch campus leaders, administrators, to help them go through the strategic planning process. Branch campus leaders are very stretched, particularly right now as we're dealing with some financial strains. And as I mentioned before, we really need to justify the work that we're doing. We need to show that we're being strategic and directed in the work that we do. So the idea is that strategic planning helps branch campus leaders kind of forge that path forward. But many of them are not strategic planning experts. And in addition to that, they're juggling a ton of things at once. They're academic affairs, student affairs, operations. They're really doing it all. And to add one more thing to their plate is just too much, might set them over the edge. So the toolkit that I created is simple. It's really streamlined. And it has lots of discussion guides and worksheets and things to really simplify the process and help lead them through the strategic planning process. One of the most important parts about the planning process used in branching out is that it is inclusive. In my experience working in these populations, it's so important to make sure that the entire organization is involved in the planning process to get every perspective. And so that was really important to me in relaying, in writing this book as well.
Okay. When I worked at Bell South, we did a company-wide assessment, and they didn't like the results, so they never showed it to anybody.
That happens a lot of places, Thom.
And I would always ask him, "Where is that thing? What are we going to do with it?"
Probably still hidden somewhere on the shelf.
Barbara, you got another question?
I do. Allison, we've talked a lot about branch campuses. Can you talk about the difference between a branch campus and a main campus and your involvement in all of that?
Sure. So technically speaking, the difference between a branch campus and a main campus is that the branch campus is geographically separate. It's independent. And it's typically located in an area where students may not otherwise have access to higher education because they can't get to the main campus. Most branch campuses were founded to improve access for place-bound students. For example, at the last college where I worked, the branch was located about 35 minutes from the main campus in an area that didn't have broad access to public transportation. And then we attracted students who were even another 30 minutes from campus. So if they were to commute to the main campus, it would have been over an hour. So that just isn't feasible for a lot of students. The students that attend branch campuses are traditionally non-traditional. So they're juggling multiple priorities, schoolwork, work, family life. Many are parents themselves trying to juggle children and families as well. And especially as we went through COVID, we saw that it was one of our most vulnerable student populations, and which just testifies to the importance of branch campuses in improving access to higher education for many of our communities.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what I should call her other than Joyce. So Joyce has a question for you, Allison. She says, can the process in branching out be used in non-higher ed organizations?
Yes. So, and we can call her My Joyce.
Okay.
We can share her. So the answer is yes. The process in branching out can be used in non-higher ed organizations. I'll say it was published and marketed as a branch campus planning process, but because that's what I wrote my dissertation work on, but what I've been finding is that it's a model that actually works really well with small businesses, and could even be used on, at a college and university non-branch campus. So it's probably best fit for a smaller organization, just because of the way that it's modeled. But as a consultant, coming into an organization, if I were to come in, things are customized to the customer. So if you're doing it on your own, yes, you could definitely use the book, you could customize, but that's part of what I'm here for as well, is to help folks figure that piece out.
Okay. See, Michael, you got anything else?
Yes. Allison, I saw something here that maybe kind of piqued my interest on something else, but transformational leadership / inclusive leadership. And, universities, for a while, they were talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, all of a sudden, they have changed and they're talking about inclusive excellence, I believe is one of the terms that's being thrown around. Can you help me understand what's the difference between DEI and inclusive excellence, and what brought that about, especially on college campuses? Because I've seen where a lot of people that were directors of DEI, they're losing their jobs now because nobody's in favor of DEI anymore. They want to go to inclusive excellence. So what's the difference?
And actually, the term inclusive excellence is new to me, Michael. Do you have more info on that?
Well, my personal situation with that is, to me, it's just another way to not really speak about diversity. It's a way to kind of put that aside and say inclusive excellence. So we're going to be excellent in including everybody, when we know in the past there's been a certain segment of the population that has kind of been left out. That's the reason for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. But that's a term, especially with major universities and what have you now, that they don't want to use the term inclusive, diversity, equity, inclusion. They want to say inclusive excellence. So in my personal opinion, it's just a way of watering down what we really need to do. And maybe it doesn't offend anybody to say diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I can remember that I had a situation where I was in Washington and we were walking through, I think, one of the Senate buildings, and there was an office that says diversity, equity, inclusion. And one of my colleagues, who happened to be of a Caucasian descent, says, do I need this? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and now all of a sudden it's become inclusive excellence. So just from my own experience, I think it's a way to kind of water that down and kind of look the other way, and still at the same time try to say we're going to be inclusive, but we're not going to focus on the group or the subsegment of the population that's been excluded all this time.
That's a lot to digest. No, I understand the concept. I hadn't heard it called that specifically, but yes, I mean, we've seen DEI leaders losing their jobs across the country. It's, there are things happening in Florida that I'm not thrilled with, and I'll leave it at that.
You talking about Governor DeSantis?
Maybe. I think there's a place for inclusiveness, and I think, I talk a lot about inclusiveness and inclusion in leadership and in the planning process, kind of separate from DEI, but that's not to replace DEI. I think there are a lot of ways, there are populations who have not been represented at the level they should be in leadership roles and in higher education. And so while I think inclusiveness is really important, and then I can talk about that in a minute, it's not a replacement for the DEI work that still has a lot of ways to go. I mean, we've made some progress, but we're not where we need to be. And I think when, in my work, I've talked about inclusiveness in ensuring, like from an organizational perspective, as a leader, to make sure that all employees in the organization feel like they're included, particularly in strategic planning. But we could fill in the blank and talk about that for any initiative at an organization, and to make sure the quiet voices are amplified, the folks who aren't always advocated for are heard. In my experience, I found the folks with the best ideas are not the ones who are the loudest. I think I talked about that earlier. And throughout my career, I've tried to do everything I can to advocate for all levels of the organization being included in decision making. A lot of organizations run top down, but no matter what you're doing or what your role is, what your level is, every employee needs to feel invested and needs to feel like their voice is being heard. So I guess that's where I'm coming from when I talk, particularly in branching out, and when I talk as a leader about inclusiveness within the organization.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, Joyce made a comment, Thom. She said, inclusive excellence is the way higher ed in particular can continue to work in the areas of diversity without coming under as much scrutiny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I think the other thing is, just like affirmative action, just like all the programs that we've come under most of our careers, there's a way to smudge them a little bit, make them seem like they're not doing what they were intended to do, or that they're doing something against another sector of the population.
Right.
And your buddy, Michael, the one who likes to have all those long conversations, talked about the first Black kids to go to Auburn, and talked about how, because they were under a consent decree, that most of those kids, the Black kids who went, weren't qualified to go. And if you know anything about that situation, you know that there were no people in that institution at that time that weren't qualified.
Right.
They couldn't get in, period.
Right.
This was a time when you applied to be a student, where you had to send your picture.
Mm-hmm.
You had to send all of your high school material, so on and so forth, and get people to vouch for you. Most of the people, at least the few Blacks that I knew that were there because they were qualified.
Mm-hmm.
But you can smudge it by saying it's not doing, it's you're hurting somebody else. You're hurting another segment of the
Right.
population, which was not necessarily true then, and I don't think it's true now.
I agree.
You know, if you got rid of the legacy students, you'd have a whole different. Well, the legacy students. Let me put this way: the legacy students at a place like Auburn is racist in itself because
Absolutely.
they only had white people there.
Right.
So
Right.
if you're only going to do legacy, then you're excluding people right away.
Right.
So you know, inclusive excellence. Okay.
You know, it's just an interesting conversation, and I agree. It's a way to water down what you're really trying to do, so that you don't come under scrutiny. And you just talking about the picture, Thom. It's funny. I recently experienced that in the acquisition that I was trying to do. One of the banks that I applied to get an SBA loan, the guy got all the information about the business and myself, and everything was great. Then he sent me a LinkedIn invite. So he looked me up on LinkedIn. And when I responded, and you know, the first thing I thought about, well, why is he sending me a LinkedIn invite? You know, so I'm like, well, if I don't respond, then that's an issue. So I responded and accepted his invite, and then I never heard from him again.
Wow.
So I think we need a little bit of diversity and equity in that situation, or a little inclusiveness.
Yes.
You know, why is it that he would talk to me before, but then once he basically figured out that I was who I said I was, then there was all cut off as far as communication and getting the financing that I needed.
But I think if you talk to people who are about excellence, particularly consulting wise, nobody goes in to teach anything that is against another segment of the population. Somehow or another, it's been made to be that way by people like DeSantis and so on and so forth. I don't like DeSantis, Allison. I'm sorry. So, and I ain't scared to say it. Stupid. He and Tommy are right up there next to each other.
Yes.
Anyway, so we can move on. We got a few more minutes. Allison, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't discussed?
I think we've covered it all, but I just wanted to thank all of you for the time today. It's been a fun conversation. You've made me put on my thinking cap and stretched me a little bit a few times in this conversation, and I appreciate all of you. So thank you.
Well, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. And I know Joyce is, I'm sure she'll have a conversation with you at some point, because she's been commenting over here in the chat section. So anything from Michael, Barbara, anything from you guys?
Well, thank you for being with us, Allison.
Yeah, I want to say thank you. One thing I wanted to ask you about is that there was a part of your background where you said you grew enrollment at a university exponentially. How did you go about doing that, given criteria to get into college and stuff? What was your strategy to grow enrollment? How did you accomplish?
Well, there are a couple of different. So I worked in admissions on the private university side very early in my career, and I know I did see some significant enrollment growths at that organization, really by relationship building. I'd gone into a territory where I thought there was potential that was previously untapped, and was able to go in and make relationships with guidance counselors and really be boots on the ground to be there to attract the students. So it comes back to relationships in that particular instance.
Okay, good. You said something key. You went into an area that had been previously untapped. So you went there and then made them feel welcome and needed and brought them in. That's key. And like you say, to accomplish these goals, that's one of the things people have to really do.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Allison. We appreciate it. Enjoyed having you.
Thank you.
Sean? Okay. My closing comments, or as I see it. The Republican presidential debate is this Wednesday night, and I look forward to seeing who actually will take the opportunity to distinguish themselves, who can make a legitimate point without attacking or demeaning someone else. It's a great opportunity for most of them. Most of them we haven't seen or maybe heard of, but haven't seen. Hopefully they'll make the adjustment to not having you know who on the stage distracting from the truth. Perhaps in that circumstance, we may actually get to learn something. Also, we will have to pay attention to see if DeSantis can follow the playbook that's been written out for him. We'll see. And that's how I see it on this August the 22nd in the year 2023. That's our show for today. I want to thank the audience. We appreciate you. I want to thank our G-List guests. Thank our sponsor, Best Girl Inc. Thanks again to the TWT team, Barbara, Sean, Emily, Michael, and Joyce. And that's it for this August the 22nd. Remember to enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Peace.